The first trilateral negotiations between Ukraine, the US, and Russia in the United Arab Emirates. Everything that is known at this moment. Kherson, the fourth year living under constant danger. A report on the lives of people and the realities of a frontline city.
Of course, there isn't enough heating or anything else, but the main thing is that nothing falls on your head. That's the most important thing. We keep going because we've already been through so much.
Berlin is expelling a Russian diplomat for espionage. This concerns the deputy military attaché who worked at the Russian embassy in Berlin. So today in the United Arab Emirates, the first trilateral talks between Ukraine, the US, and Russia have begun. The Ukrainian delegation is represented, in particular, by the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov. The head of the president's office, Kirilo Budanov, and his deputy, Sergei Kislitsyn, are also present. According to Volodymyr Zelensky, the diplomatic team has many tasks ahead of them. At the trilateral meeting, they are discussing the parameters for ending Russia's war against Ukraine. And now there should be some answers from Russia, Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized.
The main thing is that Russia must be ready to end this war. The main thing is that Russia must be ready to end this war, the very war it started itself. Ukraine's positions are clear. I have defined the framework for dialogue for our delegation. The permanent delegation is in constant contact. Rustem Umerov, Kirilo Budanov, David Arakamya, Serhiy Kislitsyn. Tomorrow, General Natov, the chief of the general staff, and a representative of the main intelligence director at Skibitsky will also join the negotiations. As for the substance of the negotiations, it's still too early to draw any conclusions today. We'll see how the conversation goes tomorrow and what results there'll be. It is necessary that not only Ukraine has the desire to end this war and achieve complete security, but that Russia somehow also develop such a desire.
The Russian delegation in the United Arab Emirates is headed by the chief of the main directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, Kostyukov. This was reported by Putin's aide, Ushakov. He clarified that the delegation received specific instructions from Putin and emphasized that Russia intends to continue the war against Ukraine until, quote, a political and diplomatic settlement is achieved. At the same time, the press secretary of the Russian dictator, Peskov, stated that the Kremlin's position on Donbas has not changed, claiming that the Ukrainian armed forces must be withdrawing from this territory. Let me also remind you that the day before, negotiations took place in Moscow between representatives of the US and Putin, and according to Ushakov, they were supposedly constructive and extremely frank. Four people were killed as a result of a Russian drone strike in the Donetsk region. Another 5 were injured, including 3 children. This was reported by the regional prosecutor's office. In the Kramatorsk district, Garand-2 drones attacked a residential area. 3 people were killed there, including a father and his 5-year-old son. The child's mother, 3 girls, and also their neighbor were injured. They suffered blast injuries and burns. 2 residential houses were destroyed. Law enforcement officers have launched an investigation into a war crime. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, as a result of Russian attacks, 1 person was killed and 2 others were injured. Among them is a child. Explosions were heard in Nikopol, Pokrovska, Marganetska, and Mirovska communities. According to the head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration, Alexander Hanja, the enemy attacked all day, using FPV drones, artillery, and cabs. Private homes, outbuildings, greenhouses, a store, and vehicles were damaged. 1 outbuilding was destroyed. Infrastructure was also damaged. In addition, a fire broke out in Kryvyi Rih due to a Russian attack. The fire was quickly extinguished. Also in Kryvyi Rih, after Russian strikes, 2 mines lost power and nearly 100 miners were trapped underground at a depth of more than 1 kilometer. This was reported by the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. The rescue operation lasted 6 hours. All the miners were brought to the surface alive and well. This is far from the first time that, due to strikes by the Russian army, Ukrainian mine workers have been trapped underground. At Great Bep. For the 4th year, in Frontline Kherson, people live under constant danger. The Russian army attacks the city not only with artillery, but also with FPV drones. Despite constant shelling and truly difficult, very difficult conditions, the city continues to live. Kherson residents work, go for walks, and support each other. A report from Kherson, Kupiansk.
Damaged residential buildings on deserted streets, doors and windows boarded up with OSB panels. In some buildings, there are holes caused by shelling. This is what Ukrainians' Kherson looks like now. Before the full-scale invasion, Tatiana lived in the area of the Antonivsky Bridge. Now it is one of the most dangerous areas for civilians because of its proximity to the front line. The woman moved from there to another part of the city because of regular artillery shelling, drone attacks, and mortar strikes by the Russian occupiers.
We've already left for the second time, but people are still living there. There's no gas, no electricity, no water.
In Kherson itself, there are also interruptions with water and electricity. But despite this, the city goes on living its own life. Shops and coffee houses are open. There is no shortage of food, say local residents.
People, probably myself included, after the occupation, it's become so normal that we hardly even notice it anymore. Of course, there's not enough heating or anything else. But the main thing is that nothing falls on your head. That's the most important there. We're holding on because we've already been through so much.
There are few buildings left in the city that haven't been damaged by shelling. The Kherson Regional Administration building has been completely destroyed. Yet, even above the ruins, the Ukrainian state flag and the city standard still fly. Symbols that show they are not getting up.
People have gotten used to everything. They only react when something lands nearby or flies overhead. For the most part, they've adapted to the situation.
I've gotten used to everything, too. When my friend came to visit me, she was scared. But I'm already used to it. I even sleep well.
The attacks by Russian occupiers claim the lives of Kherson residents and destroy their homes every day. But the city holds on, just like all of Ukraine. Natalia Husat for Freedom TV channel.
Emergency power outages continue in several regions of Ukraine. This was reported by Ukrainian. And after massive Russian shelling, energy workers are working to stabilize the power supply. Meanwhile, in Kyiv, almost 2,000 apartment buildings remain without heat. Most of the outages are on the left bank of the capital. Overnight, heat was restored to more than 650 buildings. Restoration work is ongoing.
During the day, 165 crews work to restore heat to homes in Kyiv. 83 crews are taking over for the night shift. Safety conditions are significantly complicating the work. In the evening, Kyiv experienced its 2,000th air raid alert since the start of martial law. I want to remind each and every one of you, the enemy is not only shelling our infrastructure, but also trying to destabilize our society. We are seeing a lot of fake news and manipulation in the information space. I urge you to trust only official information. Denis Shmihal, Minister of Energy of Ukraine, on Telegram.
The European Union is sending about 500,000 emergency generators and strategic reserves to Ukraine. This was reported by the European Commission. The equipment, with a total value of nearly 4 million euros, will supply power to hospitals, points of invincibility, and critical infrastructure.
Russian strikes have left more than 1 million Ukrainians without electricity and water. People are freezing in temperatures as low as minus 20 degrees. Because of this, we have mobilized our reserves to the fullest extent possible. 450 generators are now being sent to Ukraine. They will provide electricity to hospitals and points of invincibility, where residents come for warmth and support. Since the beginning of Russian aggression, we have delivered nearly 10,000 generators. And not just them. As part of the largest and most complex operation of the European Civil Protection Mechanism, we dismantled a power plant in Vilnius and transferred it to Ukraine. All of this helped to keep people warm and improve living conditions. At least 9 million Ukrainians. We will not allow Russia to freeze Ukraine. We bring light and warmth where Russia sows darkness. We firmly stand on the side of Ukraine.
Ukraine's partners from the G7+ group have confirmed the provision of new energy support packages, which include more than 6,000 units of large equipment and financial contributions to the country's energy support fund. This was announced by Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko after an urgent coordination meeting of the G7+ group. Members of the Ukrainian government informed partners about the current situation in the energy sector and the need to restore damaged infrastructure. Assistance, in particular, will be provided by the European Union, Italy, Lithuania, Poland, Germany, the United Kingdom, the United States, France, and Japan. Sviridenko thanked the international partners for the assistance already provided, which will arrive in Ukraine in the near future. Ukraine's defense forces struck a Russian oil depot, Penzo Nefty Produkty. A fire has been reported at the facility. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine also confirmed a strike on the Podlet radar station in occupied Crimea. Meanwhile, nearly 60 combat clashes have been recorded on the front since the beginning of the day. More details about the situation on the front line. Watch further.
The operation to clear Kupiansk of Russian occupiers is almost complete. The search and strike group Kartia of the 2nd Army Corps of the National Guard is driving the remaining invaders out of the city. According to preliminary estimates, fewer than 50 Russians who are hiding in the basements of houses remain in the city. And in the vicinity of Kupiansk, paratroopers from the 77th Separate Air Mobile Brigade destroyed a cannon from which the enemy had been shelling the positions of Ukraine's defense forces. Ukrainian defenders discovered the artillery piece during aerial reconnaissance. After confirming the coordinates, the target was precisely hit by FPV drones.
The enemy, albeit slowly, continues to advance on our territory. But the pace of this advance is significantly lower than what we saw before, isn't it? Just 3 or 4 months ago. I believe that the rest of the winter, the second half of January and February, will proceed in roughly the same manner. It is unlikely that the enemy will have additional forces and resources to block the operations of our drone teams. The fighting will continue, and the only factor that could create conditions for a stagnation of hostilities is the depletion of Russia's offensive potential. Essentially, that's what's happening right now. Within the framework of strategic defense, this is exactly what the Ukrainian army is doing.
Another group of Russians who tried to infiltrate Lyman was captured by the 3rd Army Corps of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. After receiving intelligence about the invaders' infiltration, the soldiers attacked the position where the enemy was hiding. Instead of the support the Russians were expecting for further advancement, they encountered close combat with Ukrainian soldiers, after which many of the Russian occupiers surrendered. Meanwhile, in the Konstantinovka direction, the defense forces repelled attacks by the aggressor in the areas of the settlements of Kliaban-Bek, Pleshtievka, and Sofievka. On the Pokrovsk section of the front, the Russians attempted to push back the Ukrainian defenders. From their positions near Radinsky, Kotlin, Molodetske, Filia, and towards Novopalivka, and near Huliapol, clashes were recorded near Varvarivka. Vozdrizhenka, Dolinka, and Zhelznodorozhne also came under airstrikes.
Over the past day, the settlement to the north, our forces pushed back from Rodiske. They took control. This is very important because Rodinsky, in principle, in this ongoing struggle for Pokrovsk, is fundamentally significant. Well, maybe less intense, but fighting is also taking place towards Rashin and around Rashin.
Pilots from the Perun unit of the 42nd Separate Mechanized Brigade carried out effective operations in the Alexandrivka direction. In particular, over the past day, they managed to strike a shelter used by Russian drone operators, destroy motorcycles, and eliminate 2 invaders. They shared footage of their combat operations online. At the same time, analysts from the Institute for the Study of War reported that the Russian army is increasing the supply of light motorized vehicles to the battlefield in order to wage a positional war against Ukraine. In particular, this refers to providing assault units. More than 2,500 buggies, motorcycles, and ATVs from the reserves of the Russian General Staff. The defense industrial base will add another 4,000 units in the first quarter.
Technological solutions. By increasing the number of wheeled off-road vehicles, it is possible to create a certain advantage on the battlefield. But I, for my part, hope that the presence in the team of the current Minister of Defense, Mr. Fedorov, there are technocrats who clearly understand how effective solutions related to drone systems can be on the battlefield, and this Russian advantage in wheeled vehicles is neutralized.
Agents of the partisan movement Atesh have established surveillance over the special communications hub of the Black Sea Fleet in Novorossiysk. Through this facility, Moscow transmits all key orders and coordinates the actions of various branches of the military. The partisans have detected increased security, the installation of new air defense systems, and electronic warfare complexes. There is also noted activity from repair crews and data encryption specialists. If this hub is put out of operation, the Russian fleet will be left without central command, which would paralyze coordination between units. All defense data has already been handed over to the Ukrainian Defense Forces for further action. Over the past day, the Ukrainian Defense Forces have eliminated another 1,280 Russian occupiers. The total combat losses of the Russian army in Ukraine have already exceeded 1,232,000 personnel. In addition, 3 tanks, the same number of armored vehicles, 33 artillery pieces, as well as 141 units of Russian automotive and special equipment were destroyed.
The presidents of Ukraine and Poland will hold a meeting on Sunday, January 25th, during their visit to Lithuania. This was reported by local media. Zelensky and Nawrocki, together with the leader of Lithuania, Gitanas. Now, Nausėda will take part in the celebration of the anniversary of the 1863-64 uprising, which was aimed at liberating the peoples of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Kingdom of Poland from the Russian Empire. Today, the 56th World Economic Forum concludes in Davos, Switzerland. It was rich in sharp statements, important meetings of world leaders, and, of course, key signals. Watch the results of Davos in our report.
No security guarantees will work without the participation of the United States, declared Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in his speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
Right now, we are actively working with our partners on security guarantees, and I am grateful for that. But they will only come after the war ends, when a ceasefire begins. There will be contingents, joint patrols, and the flags of our partners on Ukrainian soil. And this is a very good step. And it is the right signal that the United Kingdom and France are truly ready to ensure the presence of their forces on the ground. And there is already a first agreement on this matter. We are doing everything to make sure that our coalition of the willing becomes a real coalition of action. But there is always a but. But support from President Trump is needed. And again, no security guarantees work without the United States.
Before his speech at the Davos Forum, the president of Ukraine met with Donald Trump. The meeting lasted about an hour. The leaders discussed the work of the negotiating teams. Volodymyr Zelensky expressed hope that the United States would help strengthen Ukraine's air defense. He thanked Trump for the air defense missile package and asked for additional support. In turn, Donald Trump called the talks with the president of Ukraine a very good conversation, and he emphasized his message to Putin, I quote, "The war must end."
We are meeting with Russia. This will happen tomorrow. They will meet with Putin. I had a very good meeting with President Zelensky. Everyone wants the war to end.
After Donald Trump's meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, U.S. President's representatives Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner went to negotiate with Putin to Moscow. The day before, Witkoff held a meeting with the Ukrainian delegation. He announced progress in negotiations to end Russia's war against Ukraine, and he reported that one of the central topics of discussion remains the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine.
We talked about the positive dynamics in the development of Ukraine's economy and financial system, the capital market, and jobs. The president mentioned a duty-free zone for Ukraine, which, in my opinion, will be a turning point. You will see how the industry will start moving en masse to this region. Imagine being able to compete without paying duties when exporting goods to the U.S.
NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte called for supporting Ukraine amid massive Russian shelling. Peace negotiations are important, he said, but forgetting about Ukraine's defense is unacceptable. Moscow was and remains the main adversary, not only of Kiev, but of the entire alliance, the head of NATO emphasized.
It was President Trump who started negotiations with Putin, which was extremely important because he was the only one who could do it. He, together with Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Marco Rubio, and of course with the help of many Europeans, are working day after day to end the war so that Russia never tries to attack again. The main adversary for NATO is Russia.
It is necessary to increase pressure on the aggressor country, which is deliberately attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure, Vladimir Zelensky is convinced. He called on European partners to follow the example of the US and detain tankers from Russia's shadow fleet.
Europe likes to discuss the future, but avoids taking action today. Actions that determine what kind of future we will have. That is exactly the problem. Why can President Trump stop shadow fleet tankers and seize the oil, but Europe cannot? This oil is funding the war against Ukraine. This oil is helping to destabilize Europe. That's why Russian oil needs to be stopped, confiscated, and sold for the benefit of Europe. Why not? If Putin has no money, Europe has no war. If Europe has money, then it can protect its people. Right now, these tankers are making money for Putin. And that means Russia continues to push its sick agenda.
According to the president of Finland, Europe must accomplish two crucial tasks: continue to provide Ukraine with everything it needs, and also increase economic pressure on Russia. In Alexander Stubbs' opinion, waiting for Putin's goodwill is pointless. Moscow must be forced to end the war against Ukraine.
I don't think the argument that Russia doesn't want to end the war because it believes it can achieve its goals is correct. I believe that Russia doesn't want to end this war because, for Putin, ending it would be too costly. He won't be able to settle accounts with the Russian soldiers. Therefore, the big dilemma we are facing now is how to force Russia to end this war.
The world order is collapsing at a staggering speed, stated German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. In his opinion, Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine has become the most radical manifestation of this process. Europe must be able to defend itself independently, emphasized the head of the German government.
The administration of U.S. President Donald Trump has proposed a new plan to Denmark to protect Greenland from the influence of Russia and China. According to the New York Times, the U.S. is seeking to officially establish, or rather prohibit, these countries from extracting rare minerals beneath the island's glaciers in order to safeguard Western interests. Instead of directly purchasing the territory, Washington is proposing to create a new NATO Arctic mission called Arctic Sentinel. There are also plans to update the military agreement, which would allow the U.S. to establish permanent American enclaves in Greenland. Although Denmark is categorically opposed to selling the land, the proposed compromise could defuse the emerging diplomatic crisis. The final details of the document are still under discussion. Berlin is expelling a Russian diplomat for espionage, and as reported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Germany, it concerns the deputy military attaché who worked at the Russian embassy in Berlin. According to the German Federal Prosecutor's Office, his agent spent 3 years gathering information about German defense industry facilities, drone tests, and planned drone deliveries to Ukraine. This information was passed on to the diplomat, who, as the investigation established, works for one of the Russian intelligence services. He was ordered to leave Germany within 72 hours. Germany's Ministry of the Interior has initiated the creation of a new joint security center to counter hybrid threats. This was reported by the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine. The center's key task is to promptly identify the nature and origin of hybrid attacks, as well as to take the necessary countermeasures. The creation of this new structure is linked to the increase in sabotage, disinformation, and reports of terrorist attacks. Some of them are linked to the activities of Russian special services. The new security center will become part of a broader plan to counter hybrid threats. Regional authorities in Spain's Andalusia have confirmed that during the rescue operation at the site of the train collision that occurred last Sunday, 2 more bodies were found. Previously, these people had been declared missing and were being searched for. Thus, the number of victims in the large-scale railway accident has risen to 45. 200 specialists took part in the rescue operation. Since Monday, they have been working around the clock to find all the victims and clear the train cars from the tracks. I would also like to remind you that more than 70 people were hospitalized. Work on the Prosperity Plan for Ukraine is nearing completion, according to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. And according to her, this is a single document that provides a collective vision of Ukrainians, Americans, and Europeans for Ukraine's post-war future. It is based on a needs assessment conducted by the World Bank and already offers concrete algorithms. You can find more details about these algorithms in our report.
The European Union, Ukraine, and the United States are close to completing work on a large-scale economic document that is expected to define the parameters for Ukraine's post-war recovery and development. The European Union is participating in its development alongside the United States and Ukraine. The implementation of the initiative will become possible after a ceasefire is established or peace is achieved, emphasized European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
Work on packages of measures to ensure security and prosperity, as well as on specific aspects of peace negotiations, is also progressing successfully. As you know, the security guarantees that we discussed, particularly at the Paris meeting on January 6th, have brought good progress. And now we are waiting for a response from Russia. As for the package of measures to ensure prosperity, the second major package, we are close to reaching an agreement with the United States and Ukraine on a unified framework program on this issue. It is aimed at how we can guarantee Ukraine's prosperity at the moment a ceasefire or peace is achieved.
The plan is based on World Bank reports on Ukraine's needs and includes 5 key areas: implementing business reforms to create a favorable climate and stimulate market competition, integration into the EU market, deep reform of the economic sector to accelerate Ukraine's entry into the single European market. The third area is large-scale investments, attracting capital through the existing European Union Fund. Donor coordination, the fourth point of the plan, involves synchronizing public and private investments through a donor platform that brings together the G7 countries, the European Union, and other partners. Fundamental reforms are the fifth area. This refers to strengthening the rule of law, intensifying the fight against corruption, and modernizing the system of public administration. The goal of the European Union is peace, freedom, prosperity, and security, stated EU Commissioner for Enlargement Marta Koss. She reminded that Ukraine has already completed 63 out of the 68 reforms required for joining the European Union.
The European Union is a peace project. There have been wars in Europe, including in my own country, and later in Croatia, Bosnia, and so on, but never on the territory of the European Union. That is precisely why we will welcome you as soon as possible. So this is a huge success. And of course, we will report on each individual topic. We are here to ask and to demand, but this is the best way. After all, we can do everything together.
Marta Koss, EU Commissioner for Enlargement, during a discussion panel at the Ukrainian House in Davos. The economic recovery plan for Ukraine is inextricably linked to security guarantees. This topic was central at the meeting between the President of Ukraine and the head of the White House in Davos. In fact, everything is already ready, reported Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The final agreement depends on technical details, the actions of both sides, and ratification in the U.S. Congress and the Ukrainian Parliament.
The main framework agreements on security guarantees are in place. Now I am waiting for President Trump. Dates and locations? We are ready to sign such important documents for us. Let me emphasize once again, I am confident that these are historic documents. You know that such a document is awaiting ratification in the United States Congress and in the Ukrainian Parliament. Therefore, there are still many steps to take on this path. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, in a comment to the media.
As for the agreement on the prosperity and recovery of Ukraine, according to Volodymyr Zelensky, work on it is ongoing. For now, the partners are focused on continuing their support for Ukraine.
With the onset of winter, Russia is intensifying its cynical attacks. We are also strengthening our support for Ukraine. This week, we are deploying 447 emergency generators with a total capacity of 3.7 million units to restore electricity supply to hospitals, shelters, and essential services.
Europe already needs to consider creating a joint armed forces so as not to place all its hopes on guarantees within NATO. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky is convinced. And in his opinion, the Ukrainian army can become the foundation of the joint European forces. Victoria Chistukina for Freedom TV channel.
With that, I am wrapping up this segment, but I will return to the studio later today at 10:30 p.m. with a brief summary of the day.